In any week of the year, in any part of the country, you can see public opinion at work. About all these men and women who make up a public, we notice two things. Their demands for action are discussed and debated, and they feel themselves to be members of a group. Not just every collection is a group. Here we have a lot of people, each looking out for himself. Since they don't feel and act like a group, they are not a public. These people do feel themselves to be members of a group, and they are making demands for collective action. But they're not a public either, because their demands are not debatable. No one is permitted to question them. A group of this kind we call a crowd. What a crowd feels and believes is not public opinion, but crowd sentiment. And when a crowd goes in for collective action, we call it a mob. A mob is not a public. To be a public, people must not only feel themselves to be members of a group, they must also be willing to discuss and debate their demands for collective action. Collective action through public opinion built this grand new water plant in Centerville. Let's go back and see how it all came about. We'll see public opinion growing from realizing that something was wrong, through people's explanations of what the trouble was, through the remedies they suggested for solving it, through further debate, to final action. And we shall see the entire public opinion process influenced by things that happened to people and by the kind of people they were to begin with. Different members of the public had a variety of experiences which first brought about the feeling of unrest that started off the public opinion process. Let us look in on a public meeting in Centerville, where some of these experiences were being discussed.
Go on, Mrs. Salvatore. A pollywog, you say?
Yes, it was for sure a pollywog. I was getting a drink of water when out of the tap comes a pollywog. It is not good that water should
It certainly is not good enough. Why, just last evening I had some Greenfield people in to dinner, and one of my most important guests just couldn't drink the water because it smells.
It's hitting us in our private lives and in business. Take Mr. Smith down at the bottling plant. He tells me that the water is spoiling his products so badly he may have to close down the plant. Something must be done.
Centerville citizens were led by these and other experiences to feel it was up to them to analyze their water problem and solve it. Citizen committees asked expert witnesses to testify.
Please go ahead, Dr. Johnston. You say we can expect many conflicting explanations and recommendations.
Yes. These stories in today's Times are an example. Now, this group is certain your town needs a new water system. And this group is equally certain a few plumbing repairs will do the trick.
And what is your opinion, Dr. Johnston?
Well, from my investigation, I'm sure the trouble is much more deep-seated than the state of Mrs. Salvatore's pipes. The hospital pipes are as clean as they can be. And yet, as you know, the hospital boils every drop of its drinking water. As I see it, there's only one intelligent thing the Centerville public can do: finance a new water system by voting a bond issue.
When public opinion was forming on the bond issue question in Centerville, and people debated the pros and cons, their positions depended not only on their experiences with the water, but also on their predispositions, the attitudes and prejudices they had prior to the water issue. There are various ways of getting at Centerville's predispositions to vote bond issues. There were the established organizations with definite policies regarding the spending of public funds. And in the recent school bond election, voters had shown their predispositions toward bond issues. The wealthiest districts, where people are especially aware of property taxes, showed a small majority in favor. In middle-income neighborhoods, a larger majority favored the issue. And in low-income neighborhoods, where most renters are not aware of paying property taxes, a very large majority favored the issue of school bonds. As Centerville's public debated they were influenced by the press, the radio, and other forms of communication. This stream of communication can be carefully analyzed to discover what contribution the radio and the newspapers made to the public opinion process. We can tabulate the number of times the water issue was referred to at all in Centerville's press and radio. We could go a step further and classify each of these references into favorable and unfavorable. We could go even beyond that and classify newspaper and radio references to the dispute according to some standard, such as factual accuracy. We could also find out if the local news reporting presented only one side of the story, that is, if it contained propaganda. At various times during the water controversy, we could have measured Centerville's public opinion in order to discover what action was likely to result. One way of measuring public opinion is by interviews. Brief interviews are called polls. It is not necessary to interview everybody. A few people are carefully selected as samples of the important groups of the general public. By interviewing them, and we can usually make opinion quite out. And in planning the interviews, we would remember that members of a community's public don't live only in the town itself. They may live outside its geographical boundaries. Opinion process. The widest measure of public opinion is an election, like the bond election which Centerville finally held. An election is an opinion census. It gives us a chance to study the opinion of every individual member of the public. But if that opinion is to be enlightened, people should be able to get at the facts.
I advise everyone to read the excellent report submitted by Dr. Johnston. This water report makes it perfectly clear that the town's water system has become antiquated and run down to the point where it is not only a public nuisance, but a public health danger.
For public opinion to be enlightened, press and radio reporting should be balanced. There should be sources of information with opposing points of view available in every community. The environment should make possible for the supply of available information to be critically sifted in public and private discussion. To be critically sifted by citizens who examine competent witnesses and get expert opinions. An enlightened public opinion depends also upon whether members of the public can overcome their prejudices and learn to think objectively. As Washington said, referring to public opinion in his farewell address, "In proportion as the structure of government gives force to public opinion, it is essential that public opinion should be enlightened." It is no less true today that a people's government can be wise if public opinion is enlightened.